Britain's recession isn't coming. It's already here. While the government claims the economy is resilient, reality says otherwise. Bankrupt councils, soaring prices, collapsing house sales, and rising job losses. The Bank of England warns the UK may already be in a recession. Inflation may look lower, but everyday life isn't cheaper. The cities that once built Britain are now the first to fall. These are the 10 UK cities collapsing first as the recession deepens. Croydon's crisis is no longer a blip. It's a pattern. The borough issued effective bankruptcy Section 114 notices in 2020 and 2022, after years of weak reserves and mounting legacy debts. In 2025, ministers openly discussed sending in commissioners as bailout totals swelled and medium-term debt projections worsened, an extraordinary sign that local controls may be replaced by central oversight to stabilize finances. Residents have already endured service cuts, asset disposals, and steep council tax hikes. Yet the funding hole persists because debt servicing and historic liabilities keep swallowing new savings. Croydon is now cited alongside Birmingham as a symbol of how austerity, risky strategies, and cost pressures can cascade into multi-year insolvency management rather than a single-year fix. For viewers, the signal is clear. When a council repeatedly triggers Section 114, recovery is measured in years, not months, and everyday services, from libraries to waste collections, become the first collateral. Expect tighter spending controls, further asset sales, and prolonged external scrutiny. This isn't just a local story. It's a warning to other high-debt boroughs, balancing on thin reserves as inflation and demand push costs higher. Thurrock's collapse was driven by catastrophic investment losses and heavy borrowing that outpaced the council's capacity to manage risk. In December 2022, it issued a Section 114 notice, triggering emergency spending controls and government intervention. A subsequent best value inspection, commissioned by the Secretary of State, found serious governance failings, weak decision-making frameworks, and structural deficits that could not be closed without drastic action. Residents are paying the price through service cuts, council tax pressure, and a long technical workout of debt and failed investments. Thurrock has become a case study in how the search for commercial income, undertaken by many authorities after a decade of grant reductions, can magnify losses when oversight is inadequate. For investors, contractors, and residents, the message is sobering. Once debt servicing dominates the budget, even modest shocks force deeper retrenchment. Expect years of externally overseen recovery plans, asset disposals, and tight caps on discretionary spending. Other councils now cite Thurrock in risk briefings when assessing commercial ventures, and central government has tightened guidance as a result. When Woking issued, it was Section 114 in June 2023 that stunned even seasoned observers. An estimated £1.2 billion deficit against roughly £16 million in core funding. The gap reflected years of highly leveraged property and regeneration bets that soured as financing costs rose and asset values fell. Under Section 114 controls, Woking moved to slash spending, unwind positions, and sell assets. But debt servicing still consumes vast fiscal capacity, leaving little room for frontline services. The government's narrative is that Section 114 is not bankruptcy, yet for residents, the experience looks and feels like bankruptcy. Fewer amenities, delayed maintenance, and a long tail of recovery. Woking's downfall now features in national debates about whether local authorities should pursue commercial strategies at scale and how risk should be governed when councils act like property developers. The lessons on concentration risk, interest rate exposure, and stress testing are already informing Whitehall guidance and other councils' treasury strategies. Expect extended oversight, multi-year savings plans, and significant asset rationalization before stability returns. Slough became one of the earliest signals of the current wave, issuing a Section 114 notice. A Section 114 notice was issued on the 2nd of July 2021. The official notice and the chief executive's statement pointed to deep-rooted accounting failures, most notably miscalculated minimum revenue provision and multi-year budget holes that had been masked by weak financial controls. Once corrected, the underlying position forced emergency spending controls, external expertise, and a wholesale rebuild of finance processes. For residents, that translated into service reductions, asset disposals, and higher local charges as the council sought to rebuild reserves and meet statutory duties. Slough illustrates a different path to crisis from the risky investment story. Here, governance and accounting failings themselves generated the shock. The remediation timeline is long because it requires both cultural change and technical fixes to systems, to policies, and to audit backlogs. Slough's experience continues to inform sector-wide guidance on minimum revenue provision policy and on balance sheet resilience, and it remains a watchpoint for how quickly councils can restore normal budgeting after formal spending controls. Middlesbrough consistently ranks among England's most deprived local authorities, with multiple neighbourhoods in the bottom deciles on the Index of Multiple Deprivation 2025. Labour market pressure remains acute. The ONS labour market data show around 5,500 people on the claimant count in March 2024, representing one of the highest proportions in the country for a unitary authority of its size. High deprivation correlates with greater demand for statutory services, children's social care, adult social care, public health, exactly the areas where costs are rising fastest in real terms. That squeezes everything else: road maintenance, culture, parks, community support. While parts of Teesside have attracted regeneration branding, the town's revenue base and private sector wage growth lag, limiting resilience when inflation lifts contract costs and pay awards. Middlesbrough's risk profile is therefore slow burn structural, not a single shock. Persistent deprivation, low productivity, and a narrow tax base create chronic budget stress that can deteriorate rapidly in recession. Stabilizing the outlook hinges on improving health and skills outcomes, lifting employment quality, and securing sustainable funding for wholesome, demand-led services, difficult to achieve in a downturn. Hartlepool has long struggled with persistent unemployment and deprivation, and 2024 data confirms the trend has deepened. According to the Office for National Statistics, the town recorded Hartlepool faces a 5.1% claimant rate in March 2024, well above the national average of around 3.8%. The Index of Multiple Deprivation 2025 ranks several Hartlepool wards among the most deprived 1% in England, reflecting entrenched social and economic issues dating back to industrial decline. The local economy is heavily dependent on public administration, health, and education, sectors that face mounting budget pressures. Private investment has been sporadic, and infrastructure projects promised under the Levelling Up agenda have advanced slowly, limiting local job creation. Rising housing costs and energy bills are squeezing already low disposable incomes, while long-term illness and poor health outcomes reduce labour market participation. The result is a community caught between shrinking opportunities and rising costs of living. Without new, high-value employment or sustained central government support, Hartlepool risks becoming a textbook example of regional stagnation, an area locked out of national growth, where each recession cuts a little deeper than the last. Sunderland, Tyne, and Ware. Sunderland's story mirrors the broader northeast challenge: the struggle to replace heavy industry with sustainable, high-value employment. Office for National Statistics. Labour market data show a 4.2% claimant rate in March 2024, one of the highest among England's major urban areas. Economic inactivity remains stubbornly high, and average weekly wages lag the national average by roughly £70. While the city has attracted some automotive and offshore wind investment, many of these projects are capital-intensive and create fewer jobs than the industries they replaced. Retail and hospitality, two of Sunderland's largest employment sectors, have been hit by falling consumer spending and business closures since 2023. At the same time, council finances remain under pressure from rising social care and housing costs. The City Plan 2030 aims to revive the riverfront and digital sectors, but progress is slow and uneven. Young workers continue to leave for Newcastle or further south, draining talent and spending power. If Britain's recession deepens, Sunderland's dependence on low-wage service roles makes it particularly vulnerable to another employment shock, one that could undo years of gradual recovery. Great Yarmouth faces some of the toughest socio-economic conditions in eastern England. Local authority data show that nearly half of its neighbourhoods rank within the most deprived 20% nationally on the Index of Multiple Deprivation for 2025. Employment is heavily seasonal. Tourism, retail, and low-paid service work dominate a fragile local economy. Average weekly earnings are roughly 20% below the UK median, and year-round job stability is rare. Despite ambitions to leverage offshore wind opportunities from nearby North Sea projects, the benefits have so far been limited to short-term construction roles. Transport links remain poor. Rail connectivity to Norwich and London is slow and irregular, hindering business investment. As inflation erodes purchasing power, the gap between living costs and local incomes is widening. Rising housing demand from retirees and second-home buyers pushes prices beyond the reach of many residents, exacerbating inequality. The result is a town trapped between its declining tourism legacy and an unfulfilled energy transition promise. Without infrastructure upgrades and workforce training, Great Yarmouth risks becoming yet another coastal community bypassed by national recovery. For decades, Aberdeen was the heartbeat of Britain's oil wealth. Today it sits at the crossroads of an industrial transition that threatens its prosperity. A 2024 UK Parliament briefing confirmed that North Sea oil output has fallen to its lowest level this century, with production projected to decline 7 to 11% annually through 2030. Major operators, including Chevron, BP, and Shell, have downsized operations or closed offices, eroding the high wage base that once sustained the region. Local GDP remains above the Scottish average, but housing demand, small business activity, and real estate values have softened sharply since 2022. The shift toward renewables offers opportunity, but not yet scale. Green energy roles pay less and employ fewer workers than the oil majors did. Meanwhile, the cost of living, particularly housing and transport, remains high, straining households as incomes flatten. The City Council faces budget shortfalls from falling business rates and energy sector levies. If diversification stalls, Aberdeen risks a slow collapse, a gradual erosion of high-skill employment, outward migration of young professionals, and shrinking fiscal capacity to maintain public services. What was once Britain's energy capital is now fighting to reinvent itself before its reserves, both financial and human, run dry. Blackburn with Darwen remains one of Northern England's most persistently challenged boroughs. The claimant count reached 5,665 in March 2024, up year on year, translating to one of the highest rates in the northwest. The area consistently appears in the lowest decils of the index of multiple deprivation, with particular strain in health outcomes and child poverty. Manufacturing still provides a notable share of employment, but continues to shed jobs as firms automate or relocate. Service sector growth has not offset these losses, leaving wage levels roughly 15% below the UK average. Inflation and higher mortgage costs have hit local households harder than most, while council finances are stretched by rising demand for adult and children's social care. Recent regeneration around the town centre and digital hubs shows potential, but remains small-scale compared with the depth of the challenge. Economic recovery is hampered by limited transport connectivity to Manchester's job market and low inward investment. Unless productivity and educational attainment improve, Blackburn faces ongoing decline in both employment quality and fiscal resilience, a slow-motion contraction that mirrors the broader pressure engulfing Britain's post-industrial towns.